Philadelphia's got a little oil leaking here. Why don't we bring on my colleague here, Sal Paolantonio, the senior correspondent from ESPN, noted author, the author of Philly Special, and the guy who's going to do the analyst call Sunday in Pittsburgh for Ravens Steelers. Sal, how you doing?
Oh, Pat, I'm doing great. And week 5 is a fascinating week in the National Football League. You got 4 weeks in the books. You know, that quarter poll is when coaches really start to self-scout and look at their teams and see what they need. I think the Eagles obviously thought, okay, we need help in the secondary. I mean, Bradley Roby, I've always liked him. I think he's a physical player who's got some traits that will help the Eagles defense for sure. I don't understand why they didn't pick him up prior to the game against Washington, but the James Bradbury experiment in the slot is not working.
Yeah. Well, you and I were joking earlier about slinging Sammy Howell and how he had a heck of a game against Philadelphia right up until the last play of the game. And as you pointed out to me, the Commanders with 5 50-plus yard scoring drives. The Eagles secondary clearly is not playing that well. Now, Sal, I don't want to say that that's something that's intrinsic. I guess it can be fixed, but that's not a quick fix, is it?
Well, I hate to do this to people who follow this team, but it was very similar to what happened in the Super Bowl. They couldn't get Patrick Mahomes off the field, and they couldn't get Sam Howell off the field. I mean, they made Sam Howell look like Sammy Baugh, as you just mentioned, alluded to. 75 yards, 68 yards, 56 yards, 65 yards, and 64-yard scoring drives. Yeah. That defense was gassed. I was on the sideline in the fourth quarter waiting to go on the field to do interviews, and I tell you, Reed Blankenship is a warrior. Fletcher Cox, at his age, the job that he did, considering now he's got a back injury, I don't know what his status is going to be for Sunday against the Rams, but that defense went through a lot in that football game physically. They were shorthanded, and Bradley Roby can't get in an Eagles uniform fast enough for my taste.
Let me ask you this, Sal. You had mentioned one other thing to me this morning, and I want to know if you think maybe this has something to do with it. The Eagles appear to have, to use a baseball analogy, the Eagles appear to have Jalen Hurts on what I'll call a run count, whereas last year he was their primary running threat. This year it's much more selective, the number of times he carries the ball, and there haven't been any of those electric running plays. Could his not running the ball be lessening the Eagles' time of possession and the defense is out on the field more?
There's no question about that. Nevertheless, even with Jalen Hurts not running as much as he did last year through the first 4 weeks, the Eagles lead the NFL in rushing attempts.
Right.
They are number 1. Jalen Hurts alluded to the problem after the game against Washington. He said, we've got to convert on third down. And we've got to do a better job in the red zone. He said, we're not having this conversation if we score touchdowns in the red zone. I mean, right now, Jake Elliott is the MVP of the team.
Right. Yeah, I know. You're right. Elliott seems to be kicking 3 field goals a week. But the defense, back to the defense now, Sal, 27th in passing yards allowed. They've given up 9 touchdowns in 4 games. Now they're looking at a team that's 4th. In the NFL in total offense, which is a surprise to everybody. Are there some matchup problems that you see Sunday?
I do. I think Pua Nakua is for real. He has the most catches and the most yards in the first 4 games of any wide receiver in NFL history. Okay, we're talking about Michael Irvin and Jerry Rice and Larry Fitzgerald, and so he's got the most. They throw the ball a lot because, they haven't got much of a defense. They haven't been scoring much, Pat. They do have a lot of passing yards,
right,
but they're not a high-scoring team. I think that's one of the reasons why Vegas has the Eagles favored in this football game. But I think this is a tough out for them. This has been a brutal stretch for the Eagles. Brutal. You know, you got to start on the road in New England, short week, and play your home opener on Thursday night. Then you go to Monday Night Football, then another short week, a 1 o'clock game against Washington.
Right.
They have the toughest remaining schedule in the NFL, the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah.
So if they were to happen to lose on Sunday, I'm not predicting yet that they will lose the game, but if they were to happen to lose, it would not be the end of the world, because it will give them a chance to regroup,
Right.
and then come back on the East Coast and play a Jets team that they should manhandle the following week.
Right. Jets. Then after that, Miami, and then it does, as you point out, then the schedule starts to thicken up a lot.
Oh yeah, it really does. When we talk about the Rams after the break, I'll give you some numbers that suggest to me why Las Vegas has the Eagles as the betting favorite, despite some of the matchup problems that the Rams present.
Okay. All right. Look forward to doing that. We're going to do some quick hits with Sal Pal going around the NFL. All of that coming up next on This Week in Pro Football. All right, welcome back. This Week in Pro Football. Pat Kelly, joined by the great Sal Paolantonio. Sal, great to have you on as always. And we look ahead now to this game Sunday, Philadelphia at Los Angeles. You mentioned before the break just some knowledge you want to impart there about the Rams and what kind of a matchup Philadelphia has to deal with.
Well, I think the matchup is Pua Nakua. I mean, you know, this guy is impossible to cover right now, and he's a great slot receiver who runs terrific routes. He's got terrific hands, and he's big and physical.
Yes.
So he is not Cooper Kupp.
Right.
He's more Julian Edelman. Right. Although Kupp is obviously a terrific player, but
right.
This is a tough passing offense. And if they get into a shootout with the Rams, they're going to have a problem. And here's the biggest thing. Why has Vegas got them favored in this game? Jalen Hurts has won 10 straight road games. 10 straight. That is hard to do in the National Football League.
That's well over a season. You're right.
It's right, Pat? It's well over a season. And the other thing is Matthew Stafford, here's an inside number, is 11-12 against the spread as a home dog. For some reason, when he's a home dog, he does not play well, and his team loses.
Man.
It's an odd thing, but the Eagles are so banged up in the defense, and they've had such a tough road. This is going to be a close game, Pat.
Now, the thing about Stafford, Sal, now that you mentioned that, of course, my knee-jerk reaction is because they're a home dog, because the team they're playing is better than they are. And throughout his career, let's face it, Stafford has not been able to be the difference maker, except for that one year when they won the Super Bowl. He was the difference maker that year. Now, but don't you think there's a qualitative advantage the Eagles have, their defensive line versus the Rams' offensive line?
It is. It depends on whether Fletcher Cox is playing and 100%. But yeah, I look at Jalen Carter. He's now, in terms of quarterback pressures, he's fifth in the league as a rookie. And quarterback pressures when double teamed, he's only behind Micah Parsons as a rookie in his first 4 games.
Right.
So Jalen Carter is playing at a super explosive high level, and he's well on his way to, knock on wood, defensive rookie of the year. So he's without a doubt. But, Hassan Reddick has had problems with that thumb in a cast. And they play that 5-down, 2-linebacker deal so that Reed Blankenship has to play so many different positions on the field. And, he made 2 game-saving plays in overtime against Washington, one on one side of the field and then the other when Terry McLaurin stepped on his arm.
Oh, yeah.
And he's playing with bad ribs. Yeah. This guy's a warrior, but they put a lot on him.
That's Sal. It's a game now that you mention it, which could feature the defensive rookie of the year and the offensive rookie of the year in the same game. Now, the Eagles' passing game against the Rams secondary, A.J. Brown was a man among men last week. Do the Rams have anybody in that secondary that's going to be able to keep up with this guy?
I don't think so. I really don't. But if I'm Philadelphia, I'm just going to control the clock. I'm going to keep Matthew Stafford off the field.
Right.
I'm going to control the clock, and I'm going to control the line of scrimmage and control field position. It'll be a lot like when the Eagles in 2017 went out to play the Chargers in that soccer stadium, and they used LeGarrette Blount to just bludgeon the Chargers defense. It'll be a lot like that game.
Okay. All right. Well, that's something to look forward to with that game. Philadelphia against Los Angeles. Well, hopefully it's a good game. But I do like the Eagles here. I like them -4.5. The Eagles haven't really played I'll say this, they haven't really played a 2022 game yet. I think it's coming, Sal, one of these weeks. They're going to put everything together. It could be. I
thought the game against Tampa, I mean, he had 2 interceptions, but I thought the game. Listen, this team has fought through tremendous adversity. Tremendous. When you consider all the injuries they've had in the secondary. Playing against Belichick week 1, desperate Patriots. Short week, desperate Minnesota. Monday Night Football, hot hand in Baker Mayfield. Short week, again, injuries in their secondary. I mean, they have really fought through some adversity in this football team.
Yep. 4-0. Not too many teams are, but all right, we're talking with Sal Paolantonio here this week in Pro Football, presented by Kennedy Ford and Sal, presented by the good folks at First Bank in New Jersey. All right, Sal, let's do some quick hits around the National Football League. And, of course, you gave me the segue. You mentioned Bill Belichick. New England was embarrassed Sunday against Dallas, and most of it centered around their quarterback, who clearly, Sal, I think is just not an NFL caliber, or I have great doubts about his ability to rise to the tenor of a true NFL quarterback. But here's my question, though, for you, not about Mac Jones. Has Bill Belichick been figured out? Has the magic Belichick box now been emptied out, and he's just right now an NFL coach?
Well, he was the beneficiary of the greatest quarterback of all time, and he hasn't figured out a succession plan. It's like that show on HBO. They haven't gotten a succession plan. It's been a mess.
Right.
What they did last year to that poor young man, Mac Jones, with this, offensive coordinator du jour was a disaster.
Right.
And he just doesn't have the talent around him, and their offensive line has been hurt. So to me, I'm not going to pile on Mac Jones. I'll say this. When you look at Bill Belichick, he needs 18 wins to get to Don Shula.
Right.
That looks like it's going to happen maybe in 3 years. Is Robert Kraft going to wait 3 more years of this?
I don't know about that, Sal, because I think you're right. I think it could take 3 years. And that team, much like the Giants, they have no talent at wide receiver. And so they have a weak-armed quarterback and no talent at wide receiver. Other than that, they can really light it up. So I think there's trouble in New England.
Yes.
Dallas at San Francisco Sunday. I mentioned in the open to this show, I think the Cowboys are in trouble here. I think the 49ers are a nasty team, and they like to beat you up. And speaking of quarterbacks, Dak Prescott has been, in my opinion, Sal, no more impressive in 23 with a new coordinator and a new passing game than he was in 22. What do you think?
Well, 2 things. The loss of Trayvon Diggs was big. That was a huge deal. Secondly, they've only beaten the Jets, the Giants, and the Patriots. They've steamrolled 3 really bad teams.
Right.
Jonathan Gannon, who owned Dak Prescott when he was the defensive coordinator in Philadelphia, beat them in Arizona.
Right.
San Francisco's just too good defensively on all 3 levels with Bosa. And, of course, Fred Warner, who's the best covered linebacker and sideline-to-sideline guy like Derek Brooks. And their secondary has so much depth and strength and speed. The last time they played, Dallas scored what? 12 points?
Yeah.
12.
I know. I don't like the Cowboys' chances here at all.
No, I don't either
in this game. And I think the Eagles. I think the Eagles are clearly the best team in the NFC. I want to talk about the Cowboys. Now, you're right. They lost Diggs. That's a big loss. But I thought all the talk about Dallas maybe being the best team in the NFC East was way premature. I don't think Prescott's that good. I don't. And I think the Cowboys are going to – I think, Sal, they're a 10-win team, 10-11 team, maybe win team. But only because of the schedule, like you were saying. Sal, most disappointing team so far through that quarter poll that you were referring to. Cincinnati, the New York Giants, Minnesota, Chicago, Denver. Give me the team you think has been worst coming out of the gate versus expectations.
Well, Pat, for me, it's Chicago. I thought that Fields would use what he learned last year and get better. I thought what Ryan Pace, their GM, did with their front seven would make them a better team. To me, they are a disaster. I never thought Denver would be good. The Giants just don't have enough talent around Daniel Jones, and with Saquon Barkley hurt, the Giants are in free fall. I think their season is over, honestly. I think the Giants' season is over.
About that, yeah.
I think Washington will finish ahead of the Giants. Yeah. So I think Chicago, I mean, once Joe Burrow got hurt with that calf injury, you knew the first 4 or 5 weeks were going to be difficult. Now, do they have enough to catch Baltimore? I don't know. I don't know if they have enough to catch Baltimore. Baltimore wins in Pittsburgh this week. I don't think anybody in that division has enough to catch Baltimore as long as Lamar Jackson stays healthy. They're second. Baltimore's second in the league in rushing attempts and top 5 in scoring defense, in points allowed. That is just what they like to do. They did it when they won the Super Bowl with Trent Dilfer. They did it when they won the Super Bowl with Joe Flacco. That is their formula. Rushing attempts, number 1, top 5 in points allowed. A quarterback, don't make mistakes. Baltimore, in my opinion, it's Buffalo 1, Baltimore 2, Miami, Kansas City 3 and 4 right now in the AFC.
Yeah, interesting. You know, Sal, maybe during the Eagles bye week, I'd like the chance to talk to you about these quarterbacks. For instance, some of the names you just mentioned. You mentioned the Bears. Justin Fields, Daniel Jones, Kenny Pickett, Mac Jones in New England. These are young quarterbacks who appear, Sal, to have already bounced off their ceiling. Now, that may be premature.
No, I think it's not. I think you're right. And they were all first-round picks.
Yes. Yeah. And it's something systemic going on in the NFL where they're just pushing these quarterbacks out too fast. And they're just.
Pat, let me remind you the name of this show, Pat. As I have reminded you for 20 years.
That's correct.
It's This Week in Pro Football.
Right. That's right. Sal, one other thing before I let you go here is you mentioned that there is an epidemic of injuries going on in the secondary around the league, and in particular here in Philadelphia, where secondary guys are just getting banged up, and a lot of it is due to collisions, due to them having to tackle running backs that are gaining steam. What do you see as causing it, and is there any way around it?
Well, I think it warrants further examination, but when you look around the league, Jets with DJ Reed, Jamal Adams on Monday Night Football, Christian Gonzalez, he's out, Jonathan Jones, so the Patriots are down 2 guys. Tre'Davious White in Buffalo, Trayvon Diggs, I mentioned, the Eagles all over the place, Terrell Edmonds, Zach McPherson, Avonte Maddox, Reed Blankenship. I think if I'm looking at it, I'm looking at 2 factors. Number 1, the emphasis on the passing game has put so much pressure on secondary players. That's 1. And 2, because they can't tackle up high because of the rules, they got to tackle low. Yeah. Adams was a perfectly good example. He hit Daniel Jones low in the knee, hit him in the head, and he went out. He couldn't even get up. Yeah. And had to leave the field with a concussion. So I think those are 2 major factors. But I think it's warrants further examination for sure around the league. I'm sure coaches are looking at this. I mean, you know, Howie Roseman jumped on Bradley Roby maybe a week too late, but you got to start jumping on guys who might be out there and available because there's going to be a run on secondary players, 100%.
Nothing will shred your team faster the way the game is played today than a thin secondary. You're certainly right. All right, Sal Pal, listen, we're going to be listening Sunday, Pittsburgh hosting Baltimore, Sal doing the color commentary. Very much look forward to hear you on that, and look forward to talking to you again next week. All right, pal? All right, the great Sal Paolantonio joining me. Sal, thank you very much. When we get back, it'll be Sean Green joining us from the left coast. Yeah, I know I've turned Sean into a big Rams fan right now, and I'm sure he'll have a Cooper Kupp jersey on. But we're going to talk to Sean about a couple of games. As I said, they're not a great schedule. So we'll concentrate on Eagles, Rams, and Cowboys 49ers. I'm looking at some props there. We'll do that next on This Week in Pro Football.